because the guy that's constructing that says, no, you don't need building plans. Same like a pool. They're going to install the pool. Now, they don't worry about plans. In 5 years, they need to sell the house. Then they sit with the problem. Now you see, okay, but the pool is, say, 1 meter too close to the boundary wall and it's foundation issues, and now you have to get an engineer out, and so it can be costly at the end of the day. I think we need to get the word out there with the owners and especially the estate agents, because they're working with the clients every day.
Welcome to the Property Corner with myself, Rowan Alexander. So on today's episode, I'm going to be speaking to an architect to understand what do you do if you don't have building plans. You may be a property owner that doesn't have building plans, or you may have bought a property and discovered after the fact that there's no building plans. You know, if you find yourself in that predicament, what do you do? Stay tuned and we'll try and unpack that some more. So Eugene, welcome. I think first off, you need to maybe just explain to our audience sort of who you are, what you do. Just give us a little bit of background about yourself. I mean, I've got to know you over the past year personally, being involved in some projects together. Personally, my house and the investment property. We're still trying to get those things over the line though. But we've met each other in that way. And I thought it would be very nice and relevant to have you on this discussion, because as a property practitioner, there's certain challenges that we face and certain things that we go through where where someone doesn't have a building plan, as an example, where we have to call, and it's always at last minute, and we need to understand those things. So thanks for making time, for being here. But also, I think just give us some background. Sort of, what do you do? Who are you?
So, Eugene Human, obviously, doing building plans, doing it for quite a while now. 90%, I would say 90 to 95% of people phone me that there's no building plans are estate agents, actually, because they need to sell the house and they need to get the plans now, because they need the new owners need the building plans to be correct. Obviously, you need it to be correct at council, so it's the owner's responsibility to have a set of plans with him, not the council, but you still have to go through that process to get the plans approved. Many people say, for instance, put in a stacking door at the stoop area or patio area, and then you think, it's fine, it's just a glass door, and then you see, but it's closer than, say, for instance, a meter than the boundary. Now there's fire regulations to go with that. There is a lot of things going over the building line. Every certain house has a specific zone where they need to comply to rules and regulations, and they're not thinking about that. Now rectifying that at the end of the day is very difficult.
Okay, but that's why that's where you come in, because I've been on that side of that call before a number of times in my sort of career. But I think one thing that we need to demystify is that that's a common occurrence. I think it's important for people that are in that position to understand that 9 out of 10 homes that we walk into, and I think 9 out of 10 homes probably in today's time, don't have the correct building plans. And whether that be because they've added a patio or enclosed the patio or built a braai with a chimney, or whether it be minor works or major structural changes, I think, especially given your older areas, your more established suburbs, we come across that thing where people might have been through, the property might have been through a number of different owners. And often even people buy a property, they move in, or they've owned a property when there wasn't necessarily the precautions that there are today. Today there's good practice whereby you will ask these questions, and we will establish whether there's building plans. But that hasn't always been the way that property has transacted in South Africa. So we often find that people own a property, they've owned it for 20 years, and they're not even aware that the house is not built in accordance with the approved plans. So I think it's something which, first of all, needs demystification, because it is a common occurrence. But now, in my experience, the same, you find yourself marketing the property, selling the property, And somewhere along the process that either comes out, whether it be from the agent asking the question or upon receipt of the plans, because often we ask the question, the owner may state, yes, the house is built in accordance with approved plans, but they've never actually seen it. Then we recommend that they request it, and that's when the telephone calls start running. So I think, first off, just understanding that it is a common occurrence. If you're in that position, yes, it may be a predicament that you find yourself in, but now I've called you, Eugene, it's Friday evening, 8:00, the house is sold, now this problem comes out. Or someone just discovers it along the way. Where to from there? What is that process?
I always say that the owners must start to learn to get the plans ready before they start going into market. But obviously you can't get that out to everybody. We need to... I saw estate agents that they look on the plans and say, but no, it is on plan, and then it isn't on plan. So that's also a thing. I always thought that maybe there can be a opportunity to get a building plan COC type of thing, where when you sell your house, you need somebody to walk through the house and see if everything's on plan, and then it's like an electrical COC or plumbing COC. I don't know if there's something like that maybe in the pipeline, but that would be nice, because the owners are also if they want to put a window house at the back, a storage unit, they're going to put it up because the guy that's constructing that says, no, you don't need building plans. Same like a pool.
Yeah.
If you want to swim, you want a pool. They're going to install the pool. The guy is installing the pool. They're not going to worry about... The owners just need to swim now. They don't worry about plans. In 5 years, they need to sell the house. Then they sit with a problem. Now you see, okay, but the pool is, say, 1 meter too close to the boundary wall and it's foundation issues. And now you have to get an engineer out. And so it can be costly at the end of the day. But yeah, I think we need to get the word out there with the owners and especially the estate agents, because they're working with the clients every day.
So I think and that's I think it's a valid point, because I think that's something in the real estate industry that's been overlooked, and with the new regulations in place, it's forced our industry to become professional, and in doing so, these are some of the things which you as an agent or as agents should be able to identify. The trouble always comes in, and that's where these discussions become valid, is an agent or a seller, for that fact, is not a specialist in sort of plans or electrical or plumbing. They should have an understanding of this and be able to identify these things. But you're right. You need some form of an issuance of certificate, because that requires a specialist to issue, and by rubber stamping that certificate, you certify that the house is in accordance with a certain specification, whether it be gas or electrical or beetle or building plans. I've just found that as an industry, sort of be it property owners and practitioners, aren't necessarily skilled enough in being able to interpret plans. Even things like usage of areas. You've mentioned the closing off of a braai area, or we often see things like garages being converted to habitual areas, or places where people sleep. And there's this conception that not having, changing internally, I don't need plans, but people don't understand the usage change may prompt building plans to be submitted, or closing off of a patio, but now all of a sudden the bedroom doesn't have natural ventilation anymore. But
small things like firewalls and stuff like that. You can't just knock out a wall and your vehicle stands in the living room. It needs to be fire regulations, firewalls, a lot of things.
But that's why we need people like you in the industry. Because if the sort of the prior people in this process, whether it be a valuer from the bank, an agent, the mortgage originator, all of them will understand this, but they won't necessarily have the technical knowledge to actually interpret. And I think you raise a good point as to whether there should actually be some form of an inspection, whether that's done by industry actually upskilling a different role player, or whether that involves, your industry. That's probably something that we could chat hours about. But I think important is, we're in that position. You're finding yourself in this position. Where does a homeowner go from there? I mean, so they've called you, and they say, Eugene, I've identified this problem, or we maybe pick up on a problem that we are able to identify. What do you do? What is that process? Chat us through the process.
It's always good to find out that you don't have building plans before you actually are already in the process of selling the house. Because I know if you're already in the process, say you've got a buyer and blah blah blah, it's gonna be quick.
It
and
becomes a pressure cooker.
Council is quite under pressure with the building plan approval process these days. So there's a time going to be to get that approved, obviously, and that's just for the plan. So I don't know what other stuff there is. Maybe engineers' plans required, blah blah blah. But they call me, or any architect in the area. They come out to site. I will come out to site. I'll ask for the existing set of building plans. So obviously, if they don't have the latest set of building plans, we can apply for it at council, so that we can just send an email with the owner's details, and then there's a fee applicable to that. We get the latest building plans, and then from there on we can see what's obviously built and not built. And then we have to do the plans according to what's built on site and get that approved and legal. If that's legal, then we can sell the house, because then we've got the occupancy certificate. But if it's not legal, it can be a lengthy process. Depends on what the issues are.
That process is, I think, is the one that I'm wanting to understand. So I'm going back to that whole time. So you'll go out, you'll do an inspection, compare the plan to what's physically on site, and then have a determination as to whether chat me through that. I mean, you could have two scenarios. You could probably have let's say you get there and you identify something that's not on plan. In my mind, and I'm speaking as an outsider, there's two possible outcomes. One is it's something that's built in accordance with regulations, so the way that it should have been done, sort of, for lack of a better term, that simply needs a building plan submitted to get it approved. And then there may be things that are done which would never ever been approved. That I think would probably be more problematic.
I've got the case like that now.
Okay.
So we've actually a client contacted me. They built a braai on the boundary. Okay. And there was seating involved and everything. So we did the plans for it. We submitted to council. It triggered a land use management application, which we also applied for. And that needed to circulate to the neighbors. So they needed to look at that braai and said, but is it what they want there or not? Neighbors said, no, they don't want it. So now it's a problem, because land use management is not supporting it, and the neighbors are also not supporting it. So you can go and advertise it, which is going to take you a month or two, but it still needs to go to the tribunal and everything. So it's a lengthy process. You need to write motivation letters, and I think we are about 7 or 8 months in now with that. And still nobody's approving it. So there's a possibility that she needs to break down that illegal structure that she built.
So because that's actually something that I want to ask you about, that possibility of having to demolish. But I think if that building is found to be within, let's call it, for lack of a better word, specification, then it's simply a case of drafting what you guys refer to as built plans. Is that correct?
Yeah.
And then submitting those building plans to council, getting the necessary approval, and then council coming out to actually issue an occupancy certificate. So that would be best case scenario. And then worst case scenario is the one that you find yourself in at the moment, and which I think happens quite often. Eugene, what happens in that instance? So, do council actually enforce the rules, to cause you to demolish or to have you demolished? Because, there's also a lot of stories of people just build and they say, well, I'll just pay a penalty. There's sort of that mindset. Do people get away with that? Is that something that happens? Is council actually enforcing, the demolition, or do they just see, sort of generate penalties? And
I've seen in certain areas they enforcing it, and certain areas they're not enforcing it. But I mean, if you've got like that problem with the braai, it's not the council that's barking up the tree; it's the neighbor. Yeah. So the neighbor is going to the council and saying, "But listen, this thing is still standing. I've not approved it at all," and then that process starts again. So they're gonna enforce it to get it demolished. But there's other areas, and there's a lot of nice building inspectors out there, and they will actually come to your house and see if it's done or not. The issue is, you can live with that braai once you still live at the house. But if you're going to sell it, you need approved building plans. Now that's the issue. So if you don't get it approved, then you need to break it down because it's not legal.
So something that's coming up, a lot in this discussion, maybe it's topical because we're an agency, but is that how I'm viewing it is that very often today that point of sort of no return is at the point of sale. And from my experience, I can tell you that the banks are enforcing that, because the bank has a certain value that they need to use as collateral. And if it's found that a portion of the structure is not according to plans, that could be problematic for them in determining value. The property could actually be worth less than what they valued it at initially, or alternatively, this complicates things with insurance. What happens if it's a non-compliant element of the building which causes a fire, or there's a lot of complex things that people don't necessarily think about, and have been sort of almost worked around, in the past. But today, I think the big enforcer is council. Is the bank. The bank is forcing industry to say, well, get your plans in place. Yes, as real estate industry, we're pushing, council is pushing. It's in everyone's interest. But the people that are actually drawing the line to say, well, no further, is the bank. And I think it's understandable because they're the ones lending you the money. So, you need to offer them, sound security. So just backtracking. Sorry, we may be going off on tangents, but I want to just backtrack. Occupancy certificates. That's also another misconception that I've picked up. I don't know how you experiencing that, but very often I'll speak to someone and say, well, they've submitted their building plan. It's at council, now they're built. And then I ask, but has the building inspector been around? Yeah, he came around when there was foundations. And it's now assumed that the building plan is approved. And now you need to educate me. I think I've got an understanding, but I may be incorrect. So the way that I view it is that the building plan grants you authority to execute certain construction in a certain form. Okay, so gives you the specifications, it's your roadmap to how the construction should happen. But there's no authority or there's no check that you actually execute it in that way. So now I build my braai room, but is it really 800 mils or 1.5 meters from the boundary? Do I end up putting in aluminium windows where there should be a bolt wall? That check. I think that's a part where I've come across that people assume that by submitting the building plan, now that they've got it, it's almost like a ticket to, as long as I don't make too many changes, it's approved. But the way that I understand it is that occupancy certificate is a confirmation that you've actually executed your construction in the way that it was approved. So it's like a check from council. So, and I see you nodding. So I think my understanding is correct. However, the question then comes about what happens if you don't have an occupancy certificate. So you've got an approved plan, but you never got the building inspector out at the relevant stages to issue that final occupancy certificate. Where does that leave you? Does that leave you with because you haven't got an unapproved plan, but you haven't got an occupancy certificate. So does that plan, does it lapse? Does it expire? Or how does that work?
You need to submit all your certificates, like glass certificates, engineering, Form 2s, gas certificates, plumbing, roof, everything needs to be submitted to the council or the building inspector. Building inspector comes out to site, see if everything complies, and then you get your occupancy certificate.
So, but without that, you almost still in process. So that would be the next step. The next layer is checking, well, there's an approved plan. And I suppose that's where a lot of this variance between approved plan and physical construction actually
a lot of people tell me about, I've got an approved plan. What do I still need to do now? But there's a process. You need the occupancy certificate. And that's all. Well, I don't know how it is in the upper part of South Africa, but we can submit it online now as well. So we do all the certificates, submit it online onto the case that you've submitted it, and then we just make contact with the building inspector, and then he comes out to site. I've been doing a house here just around the corner here. People built a carport. Or the carport was there, it's on the approved plans, but then they close it with a garage door in the front.
Okay.
So the rules say that as long as there's more than 3 sides open, it's a carport, but if it's closed, then it's a garage. And now that carport's on the edge of the boundary. And so now if there's a fire, the neighbors, there's an issue. It's a problem.
Yeah.
So now the buyers bought the house with 3 garages, but that doesn't comply. So now you have to take the garage door out. Now the buyer actually has 2 garages.
Yes. And that's an instance where, what we've been explaining.
Now he wants a rebate on his because that's not what was advertised. Yes. So I think the main thing is for the estate agent to have the correct information from day one.
And that's hard because, speaking as an estate agent, you rely upon the owner's declaration. So if you're doing your work, you should be having your sellers declare whether everything is in accordance with approved plans, and there is a latest set of approved plans, and we can request that. But very often in that process, a buyer comes about, so that should almost be delayed, until you have all that information, and there is certain checks and balances that we put in place to avoid that. In reality, the real world, though, these things happen. These things come about. The next sort of thing for me to try and understand and unpack more would be, what is it that, so I hear these terms called minor works, things that might not need a building plan, that are often perceived to need a building plan. Things like a braai without a chimney, or a fire pit, or a tool shed less than certain size, or whatever. What is minor works? Sort of what does it entail? And I think maybe chat us through that, because I think
there's a lot of minor works items. So I've got a list of stuff. I'm not going to mention everything now, but the small things, carport smaller than a certain size, internal alterations. So you've got additions, then you've got alterations. Alterations is, say, for instance, you break down a wall inside your kitchen because you want to make it part of your living room. And then you can't really put a cost to that at council. So you need to, there's no option for breaking walls in kitchen. So you need to put a cost to that. So that's, say you just work it out, say 20,000 Rand or 50,000 Rand is going to cost you to do that alteration. And they send you a fee of what you calculated there. So that's the addition part, the alteration part. The addition part is if you build another garage or you build a granny flat or you're adding to something existing. Minor works is, boundary walls, carports. You can't do a bigger than, say, 45 square meter carport. Then it's not minor works. Okay. If you a swimming pool is seen as minor works.
Okay, so it's not that a minor work does not need a plan. It just has less onerous processes. So
there's still a thing, and I don't know if this must be in the podcast or not, but around shade boards. People say about shade boards you don't need plans, but I still say but you need plans, because you need to plan where that shade board is going to be, obviously, and you need it needs to be a certain way from the boundary. There's obviously going to be a foundation where there's a carport post or something. If you're going to fix it to the wall, then some or other engineer needs to approve it or sign for it. I don't know. Maybe the shade board guys have their own guys signing it off. But there's a misperception going out there that you don't need plans for a shade board. But
is that due to that sort of argument that it's a temporary structure or non-permanent
I don't know,
structure?
But then a windy house storage is also temporary.
Yes.
Although 99% of them is not temporary. And usually where you want to put that storage unit is usually in the farthest corner of your plot. So you're going to put
closest to your neighbor.
Yeah, but you may not do that. Yes. So I think it's, I can't remember what, I think it's like bigger than 9 squares or something. Then you need to be 500 away from your boundary, any storage unit.
Okay.
But bigger than 9 squares, I think then you need to be further away. And people are converting those units to a domestic quarter.
Yeah.
Now you've put electrical in there, you've put plumbing in there. Yeah. And then that thing, if there's a fire in that building, it's a problem for your neighbors as well.
Yeah.
You need to be at least 4.5 meters away from your boundary, and the size of plots we're working with these days, there's no place for a windy if you need to be 4.5 away from the boundary. So it's a difficult thing, but there's a lot of minor works items, but there's a few gray areas.
Okay, and hence the question, because I was under the impression with certain minor works you actually don't need plans, like that, and that's why I've asked.
Strictly speaking, if you have a
say for instance a fire pit,
fire pit, I actually had a building inspector tell me that fire pit you don't need plans for.
Okay.
Then there was building inspectors telling me that of course you need a building plan.
Okay.
So there's
also an interpretation.
You don't know what and how, but yes, you don't need building plans for a fire pit, but building it a meter from the neighbor's boundary, there must be some other rules or regulations regarding that. Things like if there's a servitude running through your plot, now you want to put a fire pit there because you don't need plans. But you, as the owner, don't know there's a servitude there. So now you're putting...
Because you haven't checked the plans.
No. So I always say, you need somebody to do the plans for it. What did I wanted to say now about... if you have a wall inside your house, say a bathroom, you want to renovate a bathroom. If the toilet is there, and you want to put the toilet on the other side, obviously you need plumbing and you need sewer to be moved to certain points. But if you're gonna replace the toilet with another toilet, I would say then you don't need plans, because it's like a renovation. It's like what is the word? It's like updating
upgrading or updating. But you using the existing position, using the existing infrastructure, you're just changing the fitting. Yeah. Okay, Eugene, thanks. I think the importance and the crux of this is that you know, sort of demystifying that fact that it's a common occurrence, and it's one that we as a sort of property ownership base will need to tackle head on. First off, as a property owner, you know, because you've said that obligation lies with the property owner to ensure that his plans are up to date. And then collectively as industry dealing with property owners, whether it be estate agents, architects, builders, contractors, you know, council, everybody in an educational process, because not these questions aren't often discussed or asked. You know, they're often chucked around the fire pit, you know, rather than discussed. So thanks for your time and your willingness to share that information. If someone finds themselves in that position and they want to call you, sort of where do they get hold of you?
If they find out, say 2 weeks before that, then they can call me, but not 2 or 3 days before that. No, they can call me anytime. They can email me, Eugene at harch.co.za, 0822113391. Yeah, go look on my Instagram, Facebook, anything. They
we'll
can
post your
contact me.
details in the description.
Yeah, so there's a lot of brilliant architects in town. So I think the best thing is to contact any one of them. Tell them, listen here, this is my scenario. Come out to site. Let's see what's going on. Is everything on plan or not? And then we can take it from there.
So I hope you've enjoyed that discussion regarding the importance of plans and, you know, that process of actually rectifying if you don't find yourself in that position. So stay tuned. I'm going to be talking to Eugene on more episodes, and we'll be unpacking some more maybe common misperceptions, mistakes that he sees people make. And we'll try and keep it relevant. So if you've got questions, you want to know, things that you want to ask someone in the industry, like himself, pop it in the comments. Subscribe to our podcast platforms, whether that be on Spotify, Apple Podcast, or YouTube. And we'll try and keep more relevant content.